In the last section, we discussed an imaginary application that shows a bunch of books. We modeled the application using this diagram right here. So where does Redux come into this? And for that matter, what part does React play at all? Redux is the data contained inside this application box, whereas React is really the views contained inside the application box. When Redux describes itself as a state container, it really means a collection of all the data that describes the app. That not only includes the hard data, like the list of books, but it also includes more meta-level properties, like what is the currently selected book. React, on the other hand, represents the views, which translates the app's data into something that can be displayed on the screen as something that the user can actually interact with. Now you might be thinking, okay, well, this doesn't really look that much different from Angular, Backbone, or even Flux, right? What's the difference here? The difference here is that we centralize all of the application's data inside of a single object. When you have any other JavaScript library, you always have separate collections of data. Backbone has collections, Flux has different stores, Angular has whatever Angular does. I'm not really an Angular guy. Redux, on the other hand, centralizes all of this data into a central single object, which we refer to as the state. And remember, in a couple sections ago, I tried to make the distinction between component level state and Redux state. When we talk about state with Redux, we're talking about application level state. So it's the application as a whole. It's this big object that contains all the data of our application. So let's look at two more examples of Redux, one simple and one a little bit more complex. The first one is likely to be the most common example when describing Flux, a counter. So here's a mock-up of a counter application. The app is incredibly simple, right? At the bottom is a counter that starts at 0, and when the user presses the plus button, the number goes up by 1. And when they click the minus button, well, you could probably guess it goes down by 1. In this example, where a 3 is displayed, you can imagine that the user presses the plus button 3 times. Simple enough. Now ask yourself, if you had to make a diagram that separated the app into two camps, where one box showed all the different types of data and one showed all the different types of views, what might it look like here? This is a pretty simple example. What might it look like? Here's one possible interpretation. The only piece of data flowing around in the app is the current count. The current count. On the other side, the view side, there's just two. The plus and minus button, perhaps the number changer over here, and the view that shows the current count, which is maybe a current count component, whatever. So React would be in charge of showing the two views, the two components, whereas Redux is what's keeping track of the current state of the counter. It's what's keeping track of the actual number of times that the button has been pressed. Remember, Redux contains the state of the application, or the data that tells our components how or what they should render. Okay, let's do one more example of this data modeling in the next section and then start tackling a real-world example.